The maternity ward was buzzing with anxious energy. Nurses moved briskly, machines beeped steadily, and outside the labor room, families clutched each other in hope and prayer. Amidst it all, Aisha lay on the hospital bed drenched in sweat, clutching the side rails, groaning in pain. After 12 hours of intense labor, she was finally on the verge of bringing life into the world. Beside her stood Jide, her husband of 3 years. At least that's what everyone believed him to be, a loving, responsible man who rarely raised his voice and smiled politely at neighbors. But under the calm surface was a man twisted by greed and secret desires. As the doctor delivered the baby, a healthy, screaming boy, Aisha wept tears of joy. "My son," she whispered hoarsely, exhausted but smiling. Jide, however, had something else on his mind. Just a week before Aisha's labor began, Jide had been caught in a stormy argument with his mistress, Lara. She was furious. "I gave you 6 years of my life," she screamed. "And now you're having a child with your wife." "She doesn't matter to me anymore," Jide said coldly, lighting a cigarette. "You know it's always been you, Lara." "Then prove it," Lara hissed. "Give me something that shows I'm not just your second choice." So, Jide made a vow: when Aisha gave birth, he would secretly register the baby under Lara's name. A silent act of betrayal that no one would discover, at least that's what he believed. Back in the hospital, Jide pretended to take a call. "I'll be right back," he said, planting a kiss on Aisha's forehead. She smiled, too drained to notice how shallow it felt. He walked down the hallway to the registry office, heart pounding. The nurse asked father's name. He replied, "Jide Obasanjo." Mother's name. There was a pause. A long, chilling pause. "Lara Ibe," he said flatly. The nurse looked up. "Are you sure?" "The file here says the patient is Aisha Obasanjo." "It's complicated," he said quickly. "We'll handle the paperwork later. Just register the name." The nurse shrugged. "Your choice." Jide left with a twisted smile, believing he had won. What he didn't know was that fate had already started to unravel his carefully hidden sins. Back home, Aisha was resting peacefully. Her mother, Mama Bimp, had arrived from Ibadan and was busy preparing hot pepper soup. The mood in the house was warm, glowing, filled with relief. But Lara wasn't finished. Days after the baby's birth, she sent a message to Jide: "Now he has my name. Make sure your wife never finds out, or everything burns." Jide had underestimated Lara's desperation. She wasn't satisfied with a name, she wanted to be acknowledged. Publicly. Legally. Permanently. Meanwhile, Aisha was trying to navigate her new life as a mother, completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. But mothers, even in their most vulnerable moments, are not fools. 2 weeks later, Aisha took the baby for a hospital follow-up. One of the nurses glanced at the vaccination card and frowned. "Ma, this card says the baby's mother is Lara Ibe." Aisha blinked. "That's not possible. I'm the mother. It's clearly printed here, Ma. Do you have your ID?" Confused and trembling, Aisha handed over her ID card. The nurse excused herself and returned with a doctor. They assured her they would sort it out, but the damage was done. A seed of doubt had been planted, and it would soon grow into something uncontainable. That night, Aisha waited for Jide to return from work. She didn't ask questions. She didn't cry. Instead, she went straight to the drawer, pulled out the vaccination card, and laid it in front of him. "Who is Lara Ibe?" she asked quietly. Jide froze. His face drained of color. It was a mistake. The nurse must have. Don't lie. He opened his mouth but couldn't form words. "I asked you a simple question," she said again, this time firmer. "Who is Lara?" Silence. Then came the confession, slow, shameful, and half-hearted. He admitted to the affair, admitted he registered the child under Lara's name, but insisted it meant nothing. Aisha's heart broke in that moment, not because her husband had cheated, but because, in her most vulnerable hour, the man she trusted with her life had discarded her with a signature. "I nearly died giving birth to your child," she said, voice cracking. "And you rewarded me by erasing me?" Jide reached out, but she pulled away. She packed a small bag, took the baby, and left. For weeks, Aisha stayed with her mother, who welcomed her with fierce protection. They began a legal process to correct the birth certificate. The registrar, ashamed of the clerical violation, promised full cooperation. But Lara had other plans. She appeared at the registry office, claiming custody rights as the legal mother of the child, based on the document Jide had signed. Aisha's world turned upside down. The matter quickly escalated to court. The story made its way into local newspapers and online forums. People were enraged. How could a husband betray his wife so cruelly? How could another woman fight for a child that wasn't even biologically hers? Jide tried to stay neutral, but the court demanded a DNA test. The results hit like thunder. Jide was not the father. Everyone froze. Aisha stared at the results in disbelief. She whispered, "How is that possible?" The doctor explained that somewhere in the hospital system, an error had occurred during blood transfusions during Aisha's delivery. Somehow, the baby's sample had been swapped with another. The child Aisha had nursed and loved for months was not biologically hers. The hospital launched an investigation, and within weeks, they found her actual son, raised unknowingly by another couple who had lost their own baby during delivery but never knew the swap had happened. Aisha broke down. So did Jide. But this time, it wasn't from shame, it was from horror. Because the baby he'd registered under Lara's name wasn't even his. His entire betrayal was rooted in a lie that fate refused to validate. The couple who had Aisha's real son were kind, understanding people. The two families met, grieved, and decided, through tears, to allow the children to grow together, each one raised by their rightful mother but connected as brothers. Aisha refused to take Jide back. She forgave him, yes, but never forgot. She used her story to start a support group for women betrayed during childbirth, advocating for stricter birth documentation laws and emotional counseling for mothers. Jide vanished from public life, now a ghost walking among the ruins of his own choices. Lara. She was charged with perjury and identity fraud, her obsession finally costing her the fantasy she had tried to force into reality. Sometimes, the deepest betrayal isn't when someone lies to you, it's when they erase you at the very moment you trusted them most. Aisha's story teaches us that love without respect is hollow, and betrayal always finds a way to circle back to its source. In the most fragile hour of her life, Aisha was stabbed in the back, but in reclaiming her dignity, she found her strength. She didn't just survive, she rewrote her story. Months passed, but the sting of betrayal remained fresh in Aisha's heart. Though she had found her biological son and created a loving bond with both babies, the emotional scars left by Jide's deceit hadn't healed. The community's response was overwhelming. Women from different parts of Lagos, Abuja, and even Ghana reached out after hearing her story on a local podcast. Many had faced quiet betrayals, some during childbirth, others in sickness or poverty. Aisha became a voice for those silenced by shame. But Jide was sinking. His job as a bank manager, once stable and lucrative, became a trap of whispers and judgment. Colleagues avoided him. Clients cancelled meetings. The board eventually asked him to resign in the company's best interest. He returned home to an empty house, haunted by everything he had lost. He tried reaching out to Aisha, calls, messages, even handwritten letters. She read none of them. Lara's fate was even worse. After the court ruling, she became the center of online ridicule. Memes spread with captions like "Mother by fraud" and "Name it, claim it, but don't fake it." She lost her job, her rented apartment, and most painfully, Jide. The man she'd fought so desperately to claim had vanished like dust in the wind. One Saturday afternoon, Jide stood across the street from Aisha's new home. He didn't knock. He simply watched from afar. Through the window, he saw her laughing as she held one child on each knee. Her smile had returned, softer now, wiser. For the first time, Jide felt true regret, not because he'd been caught, but because he finally realized what it meant to truly love someone and fail them. But Aisha didn't need him anymore. She had rewritten her identity, not as a victim, but as a warrior, the survivor, a mother who found her truth in the ashes of betrayal. And Jide. He walked away from that street with nothing but silence echoing in his ears. The day the court granted Aisha full custody of both children, the room fell silent. It wasn't just a legal victory, it was spiritual. A mother, wronged and humiliated, had been restored with honor. The judge, moved by the unusual case, addressed the courtroom with a rare sincerity. "This is not just a custody case," he said. "It's a reflection of how fragile trust is, and how easily it can be broken by those who are supposed to protect us." The words stayed with Aisha long after the gavel dropped. Back home, she held both boys in her arms, her biological son and the one fate had briefly gifted her. Though the switch had been corrected, she refused to abandon the baby she had nursed and loved for weeks. She adopted him officially, saying, "It's not just blood that makes us family. It's choice. It's sacrifice." Jide's life continued to unravel. News of his deception reached his extended family, who disowned him in shame. He had lost everything: his wife, his son, his career, and perhaps most painfully, his dignity. He sent one last letter to Aisha. In it, he wrote, "I was a coward who thought love could be divided like property. I didn't realize that betrayal doesn't need a knife, it just needs silence at the wrong moment. I hope someday, our son won't be ashamed to call me father." Aisha never replied. Not because she hated him, but because she had healed beyond the point of needing anything from him. Years later, her story was adapted into a stage play performed in universities across Africa. Students debated the ethics, the pain, the strength, and the forgiveness woven into her life. One evening, after watching the final act of the play at the University of Lagos, Aisha was approached by a young woman in tears. "Your story saved my life," the girl whispered. "I was about to give up, until I realized I could start again." Aisha hugged her tightly. This wasn't just a story about childbirth. It was about rebirth, of identity, of strength, of self-worth. Aisha's journey reminds us that betrayal can break bones but not spirit. And that in the face of injustice, dignity is a louder weapon than revenge. She didn't expose Jide to shame him, she exposed him to stop the cycle. And she didn't hold on to anger, she let it go to make room for healing. In a world where many women are silenced in their pain, Aisha chose to rise, and in doing so, she gave others permission to do the same.